Hello and welcome to the National Security Conversation. Earlier this week, Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina registered a spectacular victory in the country's general elections. The victory was so massive that the ruling party and the alliance led by Awami League won 288 seats, leaving just 10 seats for the others. However, there have been allegations of electoral malpractices in the wake of the elections. United States, EU and UK have expressed concerns about electoral malpractices. However, New Delhi has congratulated Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. To discuss these developments and India-Bangladesh relations in general, I have with me in the studio Ambassador Veena Sikri. Ambassador Sikri was India's High Commissioner to Malaysia and Bangladesh. She was also a professor at the Academy of International Studies, Jamia Millia Islamia. Ambassador Sikri, welcome to the National Security Conversation.
Good to be here.
Ambassador Sikri, what is your assessment of the doubts raised about the election results in Bangladesh? A lot of people, in fact, the Economist magazine said they called it a flawed election and said that the Awami League flagrantly wielded the full power of state institutions from police to courts to the election commission to promote its chances. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I must say first and foremost that it has been an important election because after 10 years, it has been a participatory election. The last participatory election in Bangladesh was actually in 2008, December, and Sheikh Hasina then at that time too won an outstanding victory, huge electoral victory. But in the subsequent 10th general election, which was in 2014, the BNP had boycotted it, and there was a huge amount of violence because not only they boycotted it, but then the BNP and Jamaat tried to mount a lot of violence to stop the election and so on to prevent candidates. So that was very unpleasant, and the people were unhappy because there were about more than half the size of the parliament, about 154 seats, where there was no voting at all. So the individual, because there was no contestant, just one contestant. So individuals felt that they had lost the chance to vote and so on. So people were looking forward to this election and it was participatory, which was very good. Of course, BNP had to participate. If they had not participated this time, they would have been deregistered probably as in a political party. So they did take part, and they had also put together an alliance, and very eminent Dr. Kamal Hussain, who has his own party, the Ghana Forum, but also former foreign minister, former law minister, Bangladesh, with Sheikh Mujib. So he had led this group. So I must say that there was a lot of activity. Yes, there have been allegations, but I think overall, if you see the perspective of violence in this election compared to other elections, the perspective of violence has been much less this time, number one. Number two, the national and international election observers who were there, they have given a clean chit. They have said that yes, this has been by and large a peaceful and calm election.
That's interesting because the European Union, United Kingdom and US kept talking about irregularities, and Prime Minister Modi congratulated. The MEA statement said that the PM also reiterated that the priority India attaches to Bangladesh as a neighbor, a close partner for regional development, security and cooperation, and a central pillar in India's neighborhood policy. Should you have waited for a little more investigation or reactions from others before issuing this?
I think that, well, fine, as you said, US, UK and some other countries have made these statements. But I can tell you that their assessment is that this has by and large been an all-right election. Certainly, if any complaint is made to the Election Commission, and that is the procedure for making the complaint in these cases, it should be looked into. No doubt about it, it should be looked into. If people have not been allowed to vote, or if there has been some what they say is vote rigging and so on, certainly the Election Commission should make their report, make their investigation, and the results will come out. But nobody has said that this should hold up the declaration of the election results or the swearing in of the new members of parliament or the government formation. This has not been anybody's demand. And I think that judging from two other things that I will say in Bangladesh, following what has been happening after the elections, the first is from the people themselves. There is no outcry. There is no demonstration. There is no kind of, and in Bangladesh, it is very volatile among the public. So if there had been this genuine feeling, you would have seen it. You would have seen it on the streets. Like last time in 2014, when people did not get the chance to vote, there was a fair amount of dissatisfaction. This time it's very calm. And that's number one. And number two, the press comments, the media comments, all across the board. I'm not talking about even the media which is pro one party or pro the other party, but across the board. They have recognized that yes, people have made complaints, but by and large, this is it. We have to accept the election results and we have to move on.
In any case, as a general principle, it is probably a good idea not to be overly concerned about what happens in our neighborhood. If somebody comes to power, so be it. And if there are allegations, it is for that particular country and the institutions in that particular country to resolve it. Would you not agree?
Yes, and you see, in this case, and we have to respect there's a democracy in Bangladesh, and when the election commission of that country is declaring the results, we have to accept it. How can we say, no, the election commission has not declared a correct result? We certainly cannot say that. And we should not say that, because the election commission is an internal institution of that country. How would we like it if somebody said that the Indian election commission results that have been declared are incorrect? But we would not accept it. Absolutely. We would be angry. Absolutely. And quite justifiably so. So why should we accept that in Bangladesh there should be any delay? The results have been declared, the party has been sworn in. There's a huge majority for the Awami League. I think they did not expect this kind of majority. They did not expect it. Certainly even in 2008, when the army-backed caretaker government was in force and they oversaw the elections, at that time too, Awami League got a huge majority, which they did not expect. They got more than 2/3 at that time. This time, of course, they have even much more. There has been a huge increase in the vote share of the Awami League. Now, I think one has to analyze why, instead of thinking, oh, this must be rigging or something like that. No, I would say let's analyze why the Awami League has got such a vote share, and 2 or 3 points. One point I will say is the first-time voters. There were about 12 million. Of the young-time voters, a huge percentage, they have solidly voted for the Awami League. Secondly, the BNP campaign from the very beginning was described as lackluster. I mean, it was very, very half-hearted. And in fact, the BNP just could not even get their polling agents, and they had difficulty even in nominating polling agents. And at the end, now they're complaining that, our polling agents were nowhere to be seen. Did they have polling agents? Basically, because their leader, Khaleda Zia, was in jail on corruption charges. So without her leadership, the party was very weak. The son of Khaleda Zia, Tariq Rahman, sitting in London, interviewing candidates by Skype, that's not the same thing. It doesn't have the thing at all. Then I would say that the BNP made a huge mistake by taking Jamaat-e-Islami on board. You see, giving so many tickets to the Jamaat-e-Islami candidates, letting them fight on the BNP symbol, this was not acceptable to the people of Bangladesh. Now, if I link this up with what I said about the young voters, first-time voters, they support Awami League because of the war crime trial. They don't support Jamaat-e-Islami. They don't want anybody who was against the birth of Bangladesh. Why should they support anybody who was against the birth of Bangladesh? Because they are nationalists, they are young. Awami League, 10 years of Awami League has shown a regular economic growth. Last year, the economic growth of Bangladesh was 8% in 17-18. So a very substantial amount. The young people are going to get jobs when the economy is growing so steadily. They're very proud that now the social indicators in Bangladesh are so good. Do you know that in December, there was this global gender gap report, which is published by the World Economic Forum at Davos every year. And Bangladesh is now in the top 50 in the world in the global gender gap report. India is at 108. And Bangladesh is in the top 50. So, these kind of things have certainly made the youngsters consider Awami League and Sheikh Hasina a very good leader.
Ambassador Sikri, there have been some concerns that, at least in the media, that India is a little too close to the Sheikh Hasina regime. For instance, in July this year, India sent back Lord Alexander Carlisle from the Delhi airport, who was trying to come to Delhi, who was a legal consultant to the jailed former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia, to lobby about her detention and mistreatment in Dhaka. So India sent him back to England. Does that show that India is probably supportive of a regime in Bangladesh?
No, I must say that India, number one, we try not to interfere in anyone's internal affairs. But certainly, it's in India's interest to have a stable, prosperous, economically growing, non-communal, secular Bangladesh. We want that. We want a democratic Bangladesh. We want democracy to be inclusive. And I think that if a party like Awami League, if a leader like Sheikh Hasina, over the last 2 consecutive terms as Prime Minister and a third one earlier, has actually got the support of the people because she's nationalist, democratic, non-communal, and has shown results, I think there is nothing wrong in India developing good relations with that government. At the same time, India has always had a policy of keeping in touch with everybody. Now, about former Prime Minister Khalida Zia, she came to India on an official visit. And when she came to India on an official visit some years ago, when Pranab Mukherjee was President of India, she was given the opportunity to call on President Pranab Mukherjee. And that was a great honor given to her, and so that shows that India has full respect for all political parties of Bangladesh. And in fact, even during the election campaign in the months of the run-up, there were BNP delegations which came to India. They met everybody, they spoke to everybody. So we are not, in that sense, at all discriminatory or partial. But certainly, if there is a government in power with whom the government of India has an excellent rapport, with whom you have concluded good agreements across the board in all sectors, you have implemented the agreements, you have seen that the support given by earlier governments to Northeast Indian insurgent groups has gone down, you're seeing that counter-terrorism, you're cooperating on counter-terrorism, radicalization has gone down, and certainly you feel that this is a good government to cooperate with. You mentioned about the gentleman from the UK. Actually, he was to go to Bangladesh, and he was denied entry into Bangladesh, so he came to Delhi. Of course, he had a visa for Delhi, so it is not that he was coming to lobby or anything like that. He was wanting to go to Bangladesh and trying to mount some pressure on the Bangladesh government to release her or not to have the trial and so on. Now, these are internal affairs of another country. You have an electoral process, you have a judicial process, and if the judicial process has been followed and somebody has been convicted, well, then you have to accept that judgment. You see, again and again, one must always put one's own country in that place. Now, if you had a judicial process, the Supreme Court has said something and somebody is implementing the judgment, how can somebody else come and tell you, look, I think that was a wrong judgment? You won't accept it. So I think similarly, India was very much within its rights to say that you have not been allowed to go to Bangladesh. The Bangladesh government has conveyed to us their concerns. So we feel in the best interest of bilateral relations, let's not talk about this here.
How do you rate India-Bangladesh relations today, and what does this election, this massive victory of Sheikh Hasina, mean for India-Bangladesh relations in the days to come?
I think the India-Bangladesh relationship is really at an all-time high today. I really tell you that what has happened in the last 2 terms of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, particularly the last 5 years, because I think Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina have an excellent rapport. They have a good understanding about each other's national interests, and they have been able to evolve mutually beneficial win-win solutions. Let's take the land boundary agreement, which was actually signed earlier when Dr. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister, but was implemented under Prime Minister Modi. So now you see the actual implementation has taken place. It was a very difficult area of work. Enclaves, territories had to be exchanged. People living in those territories were given the option to move here or to stay behind. So all these are very complex issues, but it has been done in a very smooth manner. Maritime boundary, another complex issue between India and Bangladesh. It went into international arbitration. There was a lot of talk at that time, what would we do? But under Prime Minister Modi, we said we will accept the results of the international arbitration. We may not be 100% happy with the result, but we will accept it and move on. So that's been done. The maritime boundary is being implemented. So these are 2 very substantial areas. Then you see, look at all the economic cooperation agreements. There is not a single area of activity, from cyberspace, satellite stations. We are building a ground station for Bangladesh, as we are doing for other countries in South Asia, because there is a South Asia satellite which is there, which will give them remote sensing, which will give them weather forecasting, which will give them all kinds of very strong and positive activities. Trade has gone up. We've given duty-free access to Bangladesh goods in the Indian market, and there's absolutely huge economic investment has gone up, and Indian companies are investing in Bangladesh for selling to Northeast India, for selling to third countries, for selling in Bangladesh. So it's really a win-win solution.
So Bangladesh seems to have emerged as one of India's strongest partners in the neighborhood. There are concerns about India's neighborhood policy, that we've had difficulties with Nepal, with Sri Lanka, and certainly Pakistan, etc. But what has led to this successful partnership between India and Bangladesh in this otherwise difficult neighborhood.
No, I agree with you that today the India-Bangladesh relationship is certainly at its height, number one. Number two, it's certainly the best relationship between India and its direct neighbors. And I
So
think
as
that
the former High Commissioner, what do you attribute this to, the success
I
to?
attribute it to the fact that there's been a focus on implementation. And I think that is vital. There are two reasons I'll add. One is implementation. You do an agreement, you announce a grant, implement it. Select the projects, start the implementation. That is vital. I think with some countries, we do have a delay in implementation. With every time we have good agreements, but then implementation is slow. I think that is something which is very, very crucial. And with Bangladesh, we have had a very good record of implementation of the agreements. And that is one. Number two, I would say that people to people. We have done this very well with Bangladesh. We have to, with our neighborhood, it's always very sensitive. And you know, the political situation in each of our neighbors is sensitive. So the politicians will tell their respective people something else. Right. You may come and talk A, B, C, D, but when you talk to your own people, for various political reasons, it's inevitable. It goes like that. So we have to keep our own linkages with the people, which has been done very well because students come from Bangladesh, they come here, we've had exchanges of media and a lot of exchanges, number two. Number three, another very important reason, and again I will say that this is something that Sheikh Hasina as a Prime Minister has perhaps been the only leader in Bangladesh who has had the full courage to go all out, which is the role of India in the liberation war. You know, she has put history in its correct perspective. She has absolutely had no qualms about accepting India's supportive role. It was a liberation war where the people of Bangladesh was fighting, but the Indian supportive role was crucial. The Indian support to the Bangladesh effort was absolutely crucial. And I think that Sheikh Hasina, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has gone all out in accepting it. Indian political leaders, army generals, civilians, soldiers have been honored for their role in the Bangladesh war. They have received awards. And every year more awards are given. Now we have a joint celebration. You know, when I went to Bangladesh as High Commissioner, and the first year that 16 December came around, I was amazed to see that there was no participation from India in those celebrations. And similarly, in Calcutta, every year 16th of December is observed as, Victory Day and so on. Nobody from Bangladesh was participating. So we were both remembering the liberation war and the successful conclusion of the liberation war, the birth of Bangladesh, but no joint celebration. So I had started that process. Now it's gone hugely successful. And this is the thing. So this is an important aspect. When I say that the youth supporting Sheikh Hasina is because of this. This is nationalism. This is bringing closure to history. You know, the doing of the war crime trial. So much opposition. The same countries you mentioned, UK, USA, other countries were opposing the war crime trial. But in Bangladesh, it has brought closure to the history of the liberation war. And the youngsters don't want anybody who opposed the liberation war to be there. So it's worked very well.
Ambassador Sikri, you mentioned the implementation of projects as one of the major reasons why India-Bangladesh relations have improved. Is that one of the lessons we can draw from the India-Bangladesh relations and sort of apply to India's relations with other neighboring countries?
Oh yes, certainly.
Because we have a terrible track record in sort of fulfilling promises.
Yes. I think that slowness in implementation, and it's because of the bureaucratic delays, and we have many ministries involved, and coordination of ministries is a problem. But as far as the people of that country are concerned, as far as the leaders of that country are concerned, with whom the agreements have been signed, they all look forward to early implementation. This must be time-bound implementation. Is absolutely vital for keeping your sense of credibility, for keeping the support of the people of that country, for showing them that look, this is what we can do. And I think that there is a great respect for India in our neighbors. I can say that. But it is these matters: implementation of the agreements, finding win-win solutions, finding mutually acceptable solutions. This is what we've done with Bangladesh.
Ambassador Sikri, let's talk about Sino-Bangladesh relations. Currently, China is one of Bangladesh's top military and trading partners. In fact, Bangladesh is going to operate Chinese submarines, so submarines purchased from China very soon. Bangladesh is on board the Belt and Road Initiative. You're talking about $30 billion of infrastructure investment in Bangladesh. How does New Delhi, or how should New Delhi respond to this closeness between Bangladesh and China?
Well, again, New Delhi always respects a partner, a neighboring country's relations with other countries. That's fine. That is their individual concern and their individual right. But I must say that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has, on more than one occasion, said that Bangladesh's relations with China will never go against India's interests, and that Bangladesh's relations with China stand on their own, and their, the interests of all countries will always be kept in mind. So one must accept that, as it were, and certainly at the same time, even on Belton Road, the implementation of that hasn't started because there's so much concern within our neighboring countries and across the world about the debt trap, about the question of you accept the infrastructure, but then you're soon so much in debt to China that you cannot return the money. We saw in Sri Lanka what happened, and certainly Bangladesh will be studying the Sri Lanka example of Hambantota port and what happened there, and how the debt trap led to China taking over that area and so on. So Bangladesh will study that very carefully. So it will be something that we sure that Bangladesh will look carefully into. But at the same time, yes, China-Bangladesh trade is very high. Maybe China will now even want to invest in Bangladesh because labor in Bangladesh is so cheap compared to China, where labor costs are going very high. So I think that one has to be very calm and understanding about it.
And I think you said something very, very important, which is it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. China can have its relationship with Bangladesh, so can India.
Yes.
So why should we get unnecessarily hassled about it?
I think we should be very clear to China and to Bangladesh and to any other country that fine, you can have your own relations, but please respect the interests of any other country. Now, for example, take the whole question of the presence of Indian insurgent groups in Bangladesh. When I was there in the previous BNP government time, that time those Indian insurgent groups were present there all the time. They had camps, they were being given assistance, and complete denial by the government of that. But under Sheikh Hasina over the last 10 years, there's been a sea change in this, and a sea change, a recognition that the continued presence of such groups are against the interests of India. So why should it help Bangladesh? Because if there's a violent group, it can only act violent even on Bangladesh's soil. So that was a big problem. Then similarly on counterterrorism, that terrorist groups at that time, all terrorist actions had a Bangladesh footprint, because they would come in through Bangladesh and use Bangladesh citizens who would be illegal immigrants in India and so on. It was a very difficult situation. But right now the government accepts that they have to clamp down on terrorist activity. They have to clamp down on fundamentalism for their own sake. It is good for Bangladesh that, having terrorist activities in Bangladesh, the people of Bangladesh don't want it. There was this huge, horrible Holy Artisan Bakery attack, and the people of Bangladesh were aghast. When I was there was, 500 bomb blasts all across Bangladesh within a space of half an hour. And the people of Bangladesh were really upset and aghast. We don't want this in our country, they said. We are a peaceful country. We are religious people, but we don't want this kind of fundamentalist groups to be active in our country.
Ambassador Sikri, you mentioned that Bangladesh is becoming an economic success story. So I wonder what explains the illegal immigration to India, or put differently, is given the fact that Bangladesh is becoming an economic success story, is the illegal immigration problem a short-term problem? Let me give you some statistics. Bangladesh is expected to post a growth rate of 7.5% in 2018-29 against 7.3% projected by India. It saw a GDP growth of 7.28 in the last financial year, while India grew at 7.1. The Bangladesh's per capita income is also growing at a pace 3 times that of India. For India, it is 13.8% between 2013 and 2016. For Bangladesh, it was 39%. So, if Bangladesh is doing so well economically, what explains this illegal migration to India?
Well, first of all, this growth is there. It's very positive. It's very good. We welcome it, and certainly I hope it will continue. But it's from a much lower base, so that, while it is growing, and certainly it will help Bangladesh to catch up, it will take a few more years. And of course, we must also respect and rejoice that Bangladesh is no longer considered a least developed country. It is going into the middle income categories very soon. So that is a real positive success story that Bangladesh has been. But coming to the illegal immigration problem, I must say that, this is really human trafficking, and human trafficking of its worst kind, because there are all kinds of middlemen involved in this issue of illegal migration. One is people who just cross the border for a few days, they come to do the medical treatment, they come to do some shopping purchases, and they go back. But you have a much wider issue, which is actually tragic. For example, I think it's not even known that much of the illegal migration may be women and children. So that is really a human trafficking issue. These women and children are being trafficked into India and beyond into the Middle East and other countries. So, it is really a huge global issue. It is not just India. You find...
So it's not just an economic issue?
No, it's not an economic issue only. Of course, it's true that maybe that's an original source that, now for example, when I was in Bangladesh, I was told that, in the Bangladesh ready-made garments industry is huge and it's very prosperous, doing very well. And a lot of young girls and women come from the rural areas to Dhaka looking for jobs. Now, maybe if 1,000 women come a day, maybe 30% of them will get jobs, or 35, 40%. What happens to the others? Many of them are trafficked. So, this is something where there's a great interest and need for Bangladesh and India to work together. We have to work together to end this problem. And Bangladesh illegal migration goes all over the world. Whether it is Malaysia or South Korea or Italy or Switzerland, you have,
not just to
or
India.
UK. So these are issues which are there endemic in Bangladesh. They travel all over the world. And with many countries, this illegal immigration is an important bilateral issue between Bangladesh and that country. So it is not something that we have to look at in a different way. We have to treat it as an issue that exists, discuss it, find a solution. For example, if many of the people are coming as illegal immigrants and they're getting jobs in India, you can give them work permits. Okay, you stay, you've got a job, your job is registered, stay for some time. When you finish your job, your contract is over, go back. So at least I think one has to make an effort, a strong effort to identify who are the illegal immigrants. Once you identify them, you know that they're not Indian citizens, you can take action, you can have work permits, you can have so many solutions which can be mutually worked out.
Ambassador Sikri, you mentioned people-to-people contacts. They have become very strong in the recent past. In fact, a recent CSDS Hindu survey had shown that in one of its public attitude surveys, that Bangladesh is now the country Indians trust the most, more than Russia. And yet in September this year, the BJP ruling party president, BJP President Amit Shah said the infiltrators have eaten the country like termites, referring to the Bangladeshis. How useful are such statements? I mean, with a country that we trust a lot, with a country with whom we have a fantastic bilateral relationship at this point of time.
One thing is that, yes, our relationship with Bangladesh is very good, and that gives us enough confidence to work with them on all issues, like I said. So, and certainly on illegal immigrants, we should. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there is a problem in those areas of India where the illegal immigrants' numbers have gone up very high. There's a social issue. Now, people may think, for example, that their jobs are being taken away because somebody else has come and taken a job at a lower salary. So these social issues do remain. So I think one has to find a solution that meets the political situation within India, the problem of the social issues in areas where the pockets of immigrants has grown very high, and the problem of the bilateral relationship with Bangladesh, which is very, very good. And because the relationship is so good, I think we should be able to find a solution. I don't see any problem with that.
But calling the people of a friendly country termites is probably...
I think political speeches, I would not comment on any political statements because that's not something that I am looking at.
But it should be avoided, you would say.
I would say that, but I would say that everybody respects Bangladesh fully. So, and Bangladesh respects us fully. So, in the political heat in Bangladesh, also a lot of statements may be made, but nobody takes it up and nobody says why you said this, why you said this. These are all matters going on in the election atmosphere of both countries, which happens. I don't think, but certainly I think the respect for each other remains very high. Should remain very high.
The Teesta River dispute, this has been one of the major issues between India and Bangladesh. And how does the federal structure in India impact on the potential resolution of the Teesta River dispute?
Well, the water sharing issue as such has been a major problem between India and Bangladesh because we share some 57 odd rivers between India and Bangladesh, and the Ganga was the largest river. And amazingly, it is that in all these decades, it was only when Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was Prime Minister for the first time that the Ganga Waters Treaty was signed. So I think it shows how important it is to have the same rapport, to have the level of understanding between two governments to find the agreement. Now, on Teesta, which is the second largest of the rivers shared between our two countries, there was an agreement signed, a kind of an interim agreement, a kind of a Teesta water agreement in 2011. But it could never be, it was, let's say, agreed upon but not signed, not formally signed. When Dr. Manmohan Singh went to Bangladesh, it could not be signed because at that time it was said that the then Chief Minister of West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee, was against it, again for political reasons, because the Teesta flows through the northern area of West Bengal, which is perhaps more of a pro-Congress area, so for her it was difficult. There are two aspects here. One is the percentages. Now this agreement, they say, it's not yet a public document, but they say that this agreement has agreed on percentages. Right. That we'll share this percentage of river at this point, maybe Ghazaldoba Barrage in West Bengal, and a certain minimum amount of water. Now, percentage is fine, but what is the actual flow of water in the river? This is not yet known. In the case of Ganga River, there was a huge advantage in concluding the area because from British times, the flow in the river had been recorded and records had been maintained. So when we were talking about percentages then, you could understand percentage of what, actual figure, and what it meant. So this is the problem with the Teesta, and I've always been saying for more than 10 years now that we must do a joint hydrological survey of the Teesta to estimate how much flow there is in the dry season and in the rainy season. The Teesta is one of those rivers where the dry season flow is some 10% of the total flow in the river. 90% of the water in the river comes in the high season, in the rainy season. So you have a huge gap between the rainy season and the dry season, and you have to find scientific methods to overcome the gap. So I think that in the case of the Teesta, what has to be done is a common river basin management approach. And actually, for the first time in our bilateral relationships, this has been talked about for a long time, for decades, but in 2011 in the declaration between the two countries, this was agreed upon. That yes, India can move to common river basin management. Now this is a vital concept because river basin management means you look at water flows in different seasons, you look at augmentation, you look at conservation of water, you look at effective use of water. And this is a complex whole that we have to look at, otherwise this problem will never be solved. For example, if you have this huge difference between the rainy season flows and the dry season flows, you have to have crops in the dry season which are not water intensive. This should be common sense, but it doesn't happen. On the ground, it doesn't happen. The farmer just goes ahead and cultivates and then says, look, I got a bad crop because there's no water. So you have to instead look at, crops which are prosper in water scarcity conditions. You have to look at water conservation, water storage, a whole range of issues which no one country can do. We have to do it together. So this is a scientific approach to that we must take, and even in the time that it takes for solution or signing of any agreement, we must already be talking on these issues.
And probably this is the time to do it, given the
exactly. So now that we have this, we should immediately go into it and look at not only signing the agreement, but signing a common river basin management document on the Teesta or maybe on all the other rivers. Because whatever we do on the Teesta will certainly apply to all the other shared rivers between India and Bangladesh, and we should look for a quick solution.
Sikri, wonderful talking to you.
Thank you. Bye.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.